tax burden and debt burden. The campaign this morning is Put a Stop to Public Debt Theft in Kenya. And we are joined by two guests. One of them is in the studio, the other one joins us via video link. Irene Otieno is the National Coordinator at the National Taxpayers Association. She is in the studio with us. Good morning, Irene.
Morning. Nice to be here.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And then we also have Dr. Abraham Rugo, who joins us via video link. He is a country manager, International Budget Partnerships Kenya. Abraham, a very good morning to you, and it's good to have you on the show.
Good to have you. Good morning to you.
Asante sana. Now, the whole conversation about stopping public debt theft in Kenya is coming on this Core Uchumi campaign, which is a civil society platform committed towards working with stakeholders to resolve Kenya's public debt crisis. This campaign is seeking to bolster constitutional safeguards in public debt management and to push for the accountability of political leaders in public debt management. Now, we are demanding a stop to public debt theft in Kenya, and there's a petition that's being signed, and there's a whole campaign saying, sign this petition that is saying, stop theft of public debt. Irene, what is theft of public debt? What does that mean?
That simply means that when we acquire debt, there has to be a rationale, and where are you taking that money to? So we as members of the coalition are concerned that debt in itself is not the issue, but where are we applying the debt? And so we felt that it is not getting as much concern and action from both the citizens who will pay for it and the government that should be using it. So we said it's easier for them to understand, and we put it as it is, that without any safeguards, then this money is simply being stolen. So it's money that has been acquired, but it is being stolen. I guess the term, when we've come theft, everyone has been pointing out, why do you call it theft? But that simply is the term we have decided to use because there hasn't been action throughout the year. I think my colleagues and members of the public have been concerned about this issue, but coming towards the end of the year, we are not seeing the action and the recommendations we've been pushing being taken on board.
But you're using two words here. There's the theft word, and then there's stop, because you're telling people to sign up to this petition. Stop theft of public debt.
Yes.
Stop means that it's already happening and you want us to stop it.
Yes.
How is our debt being stolen?
The debt is being stolen first, as I have mentioned, who is acquiring the debt on behalf of Kenyans? So where is the parliamentary oversight around acquisition?
Wait.
Yes.
When you say debt, you are referring to the money that we have borrowed.
Exactly.
So money we have borrowed equals debt.
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. Thanks for bringing back to that. So this is money that we have borrowed as a country. So the rationale for borrowing is that then it will be applied for needs that we have agreed as citizens, because essentially we, the current generation and future generations, will be paying for it. But then our concern, as we then term it as theft, is first, who has acquired that debt on our behalf? What is the parliamentary involvement around it? Is it only an issue that the executive knows about, but has there been oversight from parliament? Secondly, on whose priorities is this debt going to be applied? So has there been public participation for us as citizens and the taxpayers to understand and say, hey, it is a railway gauge that we want, it is an irrigation scheme that we want. So those are the issues that we are tying in and saying, if these bare minimums in terms of the participation around the acquisition, transparency around it, accountability around the debt, if these three angles are not addressed, then that is equivalent to theft.
So if we had said that there was a laid out plan, and for example, Kenya was borrowing 100 billion shillings from whomever it would be, the World Bank, other development partners, etc., China, right? And they said, what we want to do with this 100 billion is that we want to, put up some roads, and they will be road X, Y, Z, right? We want to establish schools around the country in county X, Y, Z, and we want to do this, that, the other thing. So what you're saying is it would not be theft if after the period, or even during the period of this debt, that we see such things being erected, then we can say that theft is not taking place.
Yes. So anything aside from that then would say is theft, because first, it has to be clear from the point that we want to acquire the debt. What is the plan? So you do not wake up one day and say, hey, there are deficits in our budget, the tax revenues are falling, so we want to take on debt. No, it should be something that is procedural, and there are procedural safeguards within the constitutions, within the PFM law. And this is what we are saying, that the acquisition of this debt, current debt as we have, does not align with the legal and the constitutional provisions. So then it's a whole plan, but we feel that government is always constrained. So revenues are not adding up. The expenditures are way high. So they say, let us take on debt, but without giving it the long duration, because before you acquire, then there's a process before. Have you done the assessment, the impact assessment, and say, hey, these are the returns that we would. So it's not something you can do very fast, but we think our government, we know our government is taking it so fast without looking at all those criteria. Yeah?
Right. Abraham, I mean, since this has been established, from your end that this theft is actually taking place, how much then of the country's debt is actually being stolen? One, or are we saying that all debt that has been acquired by the country over X period has actually been stolen? Or is there a percentage that we're dealing with here?
Yeah, so let me start first by saying that it's difficult to establish how much is being lost. And I'll use two examples here. Is that one of the things that has been of great concern is just how much the inflated prices. Let me start first of all with the total amount of debt that we are talking about. So currently, we are talking about debt of about 7.2 billion, thereabout. It could be actually higher than that.
Trillion.
And you're talking of a budget, a national budget of about 3.2 trillion in the coming year, currently 3 trillion. Now, the president some while back talked of a figure of about 2 billion that gets lost every day, and that could be a mix of both revenues being collected. But take an example of a project like SGR, 340-something kilometers of railway that is largely manual, spend about 354 billion to construct. You cross over to Ethiopia, you have double that size, 720 kilometers of an SGR equivalent that is electrified, costed the same amount. So in essence, we actually spent twice the amount to construct the same type of railway, but even of a lower grade, including just even right now, the fact that we actually have to dig deeper into our pockets to pay for that. Think about the infrastructure projects that are going on across the country. Is one that we are spending so far much more per kilometer in terms of the construction cost. But even practically, if you were to think about projects that have been put into resources, so for instance, the irrigation schemes that have been put into quite some money, the Gulana Gulalu project, the wind project in Turkana, projects that the Kimwarer and Aror dams, I mean, all these projects where we are actually paying money in return, but there is no project that you can be able to see on the ground and say this is what but what is making it difficult for us to know how much exactly we are talking about is the fact that Treasury and even through the members of through Parliament houses, we still have not seen the debt register that gives you exactly how much we borrowed, for what it was borrowed for, what are the conditionalities, or the conditions attached to it. So there's a gap. There's a gap in telling, we know the aggregate amount that we are talking about, which I've just talked to about, going to almost 8 trillion Kenya shillings thereabout. We know how much is our budget. We know how much is our deficit year on year. But there's a gap there, and part of this campaign is actually asking, can we see the register? Can we see a proper Auditor General has also raised questions that there are gaps about the numbers concerning how much we have in terms of how the money is being used. There is a gap in terms of the projects and where they have reached, how much has been spent for each project. So that's where the issue is.
Dr. Rugo, I want us to go back on the issue of SGR because I think we have these conversations all the time, comparing Kenya's SGR to Ethiopia's SGR. Ethiopia's was longer, Kenya's is shorter. Imagine, did it cost more than double? But I think we're just comparing growing mangoes in Makueni and growing mangoes in Elgeyo Marakwet. Different conditions and maybe different seed. The conversation around that has been had many times. Why was it costing more? Did you have to compensate for land in Ethiopia? Does it have many bridges or level crossings in Ethiopia or not? All those things, is it elevated or is it not? I mean, we have had those conversations. I think every time we have a conversation on comparing Kenya to Ethiopia, I feel we lose the track on a particular conversation in some cases. But that's not the point I want to raise. I want to talk about, so we're talking about, yes, we know how much debt we have an estimate figure of the level of debt that we are in. 7.2 saying going close to 8 trillion shillings. And then there are various institutions that are supposed to safeguard this. There is the Auditor General's Office. There is Parliament and the parliamentary committees. There are various others that come in. And what I'm hearing is that we don't have clarity on debt acquisition and clarity on debt allocation. That we don't necessarily know that for sure money that has been borrowed has been stolen. So when we say that we are saying stop theft of public debt, we are putting ourselves in a position where if you asked, so who's stealing? How much is being stolen? How is it being stolen? We are not able to answer that. Are we, Dr. Rugo?
Yeah, I mean, the argument can be either way. So first of all, even the institutions, as you say, the Auditor General has already raised accountability questions concerning the money that has been acquired through debt. The President is on record of raising concerns about the amount that basically we, as I've said, I mean, he's on record as it's talking of 2 billion. We still, I mean, the figure could be higher or just around that. And therefore, anytime you lack accountability, and we also have cases that basically have been prosecuted, the Kimorera and Aurora Dam is just one of those examples, cases that basically have been, put to court to be able. So the only way to be able to say that the unaccounted amount of money is basically money that has been misused and abused, and there is a public trust to the institutions to the individuals and institutions that are responsible to that. It's the only way then you can be able to make an argument that say, fine, look here, this is the amount of money that we can be able to account for. This is what the OAG, the Auditor General, is raising. These are cases, some of which are still lying in court. And therefore, what action then? Somebody has to take responsibility in that sense.
I'm going to ask this question of the two of you. Either one of you can respond. This discussion about debt is a good discussion. The discussion about how it is we acquire it is an even better discussion. When we look at the efforts that the government is making to try and ensure we pay this debt, it is actually an even better discussion. However, there isn't sufficient discussion on how it is we are plugging the loopholes and how it is we are ensuring that this theft, because the theft contributes significantly to the problems that we are now talking about. Now, making people aware is good, but if you make people aware and yet there is no solution in the horizon, suggested or otherwise, then it just becomes an academic subject. And so it doesn't really achieve much beyond titillating our minds and spurring on intellectual discourse. So, given that the two of you are experts, if one were to ask for a roadmap and say, folks, how can we best tackle this thing at every level, at the Mwananchi level, at the county level, at the constituency level, at the ward level, so that, and how do you put in place comparative, significant examples so that somebody, when you talk billions, most people, I'm among the people who's confused. A billion, I cannot quantify a billion into things I understand. Talk to me about classrooms, I will understand. Road, I may not understand. Talk to me about food that I ought to be eating and I'm not eating, I'll understand. Now, When you set about this discourse, the things that I've mentioned, do you bear them in mind? And if you do, how do you communicate these things to those who you want to hear what it is you're saying?
Let me answer that before Dr. Ari weighs in, but allow me first to just comment on something that came up on why would we then say this is theft of public funds when we are saying we do not have the records. I would add on what Dr. Rugo has said. This is public funds. It's an office where, we expect the highest level of trust. So if you're not keeping things as simple as contracts, you're not sharing contracts, there are no debt registers being made public. What is a taxpayer and a citizen supposed to think? Obviously, there's something you're hiding. So the government has not come to this conversation with clean hands, and neither are we as civil society, media, or citizens also going to sugarcoat the issues. Looking at the decisions that have come from court recently on any issue touching on economic crimes, they have now shifted the burden of proof. If you are the one holding more money than than what is perceived to be your income, it is you to show how you have then acquired those resources. So in a similar manner, in this case, it ought to be the government, because where would a citizen get debt registers? Where would civil society get it? If the Senate itself and the Auditor General is saying they do not have these documents, what is expected of citizens? So we are putting it there that for us it is theft unless the government proves otherwise, and that is a position and a position that we have seen also the courts moving along. On to the question you have asked. Indeed, the debt conversation has been something we've found a bit difficult for citizens to rally around, first because of the numbers you're talking about and what everyone needs to contend with on a daily basis. So on this particular, we have attempted to look even at the one on the KEMSA wastage, the resources that were wasted on that. What we have found out is the amount that was wasted would be able to give 1,000 ICU beds, roughly 1,106 per county. So that would already contextualize the whole conversation, particularly now when we're looking at COVID-19 preparedness. My colleague Rugo would speak to the others. But when you're asking on what can be done, a lot of things can be done, and I'll attempt to just give 2 or 3 that we as National Taxpayers Association, being members of a Okoa Uchumi Coalition, I think is a way out of this problem. First, we need to understand what is driving the debt conversation. So we are saying the debt is high. That is agreed, I think, unless otherwise, but that is an agreed fact. That debt is not sustainable looking at the revenues we are bringing in and even where you are applying the projects. But what is driving that debt? There's a lot of excesses from the government at both levels. So we have managed to look at the Auditor General's report for each county, look at the executive report, look at the assembly report for all the 47 counties. That is something we have been able to do as an institution. The wastage there is a lot. So that makes you also ask the question, if you're saying we are acquiring debt because we have insufficient revenues, but then we are seeing where you are applying, look at the travel allowances that all these entities, 47 entities, and you're looking at an assembly and an executive, it's a lot. And within even COVID, the control of budget has pointed out that in some counties, the travel budget is still high. So you're wondering, where are people traveling, even within the COVID situation? So a lot of the expenditure we are having is not pro Mwananchi, is pro a little bit of elite person. So that is one area that we have picked out. And this is an area that not civil society can put pressure on. As citizens that are paying taxes within those counties, querying this report, it's as simple as I'm a fish trader in Homa Bay. So the county has come with new levies before I sell my fish. Am I really asking where are these levies going to? Am I querying and seeing that these documents are available? We have tried to simplify as institutions, and now we have said we are taking them to traders so that the traders at the point of a county coming to extract money from you, you can ask, where is it being applied? So one, for me, is to address the excesses at the county level. We come then at the national level, which we have consistently been saying. That wage bill must be looked at. We have asked simple questions like when you're looking at the NHIF, now that we are simply celebrating and we are taking stock of universal healthcare. We do not have smart cards even for NHIF. We have heard that NHIF is losing, 6 billion, what I was reading from their report, in terms of fictitious claims from private sector that are colluding. So when you look at such an amount, and it's something as simple, private sector has set the pace, and you cannot have a private health insurer that doesn't have a smart card. So why is government not doing what they ought to do, unless they are shielding players who are elites? Because me and you cannot defraud NHIF. These are players within government. So for me, the thing is very simple, and it's government being serious. They are not serious. I've given you the example of NHIF. We give
NHIF has actually rolled out the digitization measure.
Yes.
Now, if you go to hospital, you'll even receive an SMS that tells you you've been into this facility and this is what you sought and this is how much NHIF is paying. But they're already rolling that out.
Yeah, they're rolling it out. But the question then becomes, how many years have we lost before this rollout? Where has now the pressure come in? So this is something that ought to have been done from the onset. Because for me, what we are saying as institutions is the private sector seems to even go ahead of government where they ought to. Government is kind of playing catch up with issues that me and you have agreed is a way to reduce accountability. So the concern where you then have raised in terms of a roadmap, it's very clear that first we need to understand what is driving what we are calling deficits, because really we need to live within our means, and we have already given it. First, address the wage bill concern, because remember the wage bill, when we're talking about the wage bill, is very high, but we understand it's only 17% of Kenyans that are employed by government itself. So would you say that more than 50% of the budget is going to only 17% of the population? And when you query further, a significant part of it is on allowances. So we need to agree as a country, is allowance as important as public services? Do we, and allow me to belabor this a bit. I have seen attempts by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to say we need to address allowances. And I remember Co2 and the likes coming up and saying, no, you cannot touch civil servants. We are here representing government. But as a country, we need to agree. And I give the case of COVID-19. So even if I was a civil servant, I have my allowances of 8,000 when I travel or something. But now when the pandemic is here, we are all relying on public services. Public services that we have perennially ignored, but everyone has their simple safety net of 7,000 allowances. So how does that help the bigger, the larger, all of us? So I think some of the things you mentioned is not only government, but even we as citizens agreeing, let me not take on the allowance, but insist that public services is strengthened, so that I don't have my 8,000, but my child can go to a good public school. There is good healthcare. There are good roads. That for me is more than the 7,000 that I can get as Irene, but would be able to give us a safety net as a country.
With us in the studio is Irene Otieno. She's the National Coordinator of the National Taxpayers Association, an expert on matters of governance, public service. She's a lawyer as well. Joining us via video is Dr. Abraham Rugo. He's a Country Manager, International Budget Partnerships, Kenya. And he is also, of course, an expert on public finance management. The conversation this morning is this campaign by Okoa Uchumi Coalition, putting a stop to theft of public debt. And the Okoa Uchumi Coalition is asking you to sign that petition. Put a stop to theft of public debt. And that's where we are asking, so where is the public debt being stolen? How can we put a stop to this? What do we need to do? Irene, you explained how money is just getting lost left, right, and center, and the various ways in which you could say, try and plug this. I want to come to you, Abraham. Listening to, all these things that we're talking about, it sounds to me more of it like being a conversation around misallocation or misappropriation of budgets and poor oversight and poor controls in how then the money is being used. It starts from that point. So what did you budget for? How are you using it? Did you agree on this? Did you apply it properly? Is that not so? Is that really directly about theft of the debt, or is it something that can be stopped if we did public finance management better?
Thank you. Let me first of all start by bringing it a bit closer. So across, Citi had asked a question around what can citizens do, and I just wanted to say two things, and I come to your question, Eric. One is that many of us as citizens do not ask questions about sources of money. For instance, right now, there's a lot of conversation, of course, towards the coming election. Politicians, both in government and outside government, are going around the country campaigning and all that. A lot of those places, people actually do receive some money, some facilitation. Few ask questions: where is this money coming from? How comes just the other day, you were struggling with us, but now you have all this array of money. And the more many of us ask questions about how resources are being applied and how they are being utilized, the more there is pressure, because it creates political pressure. I think the second one is also to educate ourselves on the budget and what is entailed in there, and this has to do with as basic services as the health center that you go to, the schools that we go to. There's a capitation that is provided for resources, the agriculture services, the trade and investment support that we receive. All these services that we go for in government, including even the police services, the security services, they are allocated a budget. And in the line item budgets, those lines are available, and it's very easy to be able to say, we know this is how much you have been allocated for this kind of service. How have you utilized it, and how come this service was allocated as some money, but we don't see it? But let me come to your question. Yes, you're right that there's a question around controls. But let me start by first saying that even with the budget, so the way the budget is done over the years is that over the last, is that when the budget is being done, there's a deficit. So there's a difference between the revenue that is expected and the expenditure that needs to happen. And expenditure, of course, is always higher. But what we have noticed, even during the year, when revenues targets are not met, the expenditure levels still are increased upwards, and therefore what happens is that the deficits have been growing within the year more than even at the start of the financial year, and that leads more to and that's a first check, which we think is critical. We have told Parliament, and I think they did accept that. Even the National Treasury did accept that recommendation, that there needs to be only one supplementary budget within a year, because what would happen is that a supplementary budget is done, money is moved from this line item to that line item, is moved to that. That's one. Secondly, is that there's a lot of expenses that are done off the system. So there's an IFMIS system, the Integrated Financial Management Information System, that all procurement, all payments are supposed to be done within it. Now, we understand that not all payments, not all procurement activities actually happen within that system. And there are all manner of reasons that sometimes are given. Internet was down, there was no power, and therefore we had to pay. So there's that. But there's a third one that is also quite critical, and this has to do with money that is collected in terms of, and maybe we should have said that when public debt is procured, it becomes a revenue. So it becomes part of the revenues, that, part of the money that the government has for utilization. A lot of that money sometimes is actually utilized off the system. And that's why, for instance, let me use the classic case of Kimorer and Aror dams, for instance, where the discussion was that already commitments had been made, money had been spent, but no work was happening on the. So there's a control side of things, but there's also then the questions that have to do with the oversighting of why do resources have to be spent off the system year on year. The Auditor General raises them. Parliament, the institutions of Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate have the sole responsibility as the representatives of Kenyans to be able to raise. So you have loopholes that have to do with how revenue is collected and accounted for. Then you have loopholes about how the expenditures and the inflation that we talk about of costs and projects. But then you have the overall oversight of saying who is responsible for how the money in this particular ministry. And people need to take responsibility. How money is spent in the Ministry of Health, money is spent in the Ministry of Agriculture, in the Ministry and the various departments of Agriculture. So it's a mix, but the point that we don't want to miss is that there's a responsibility holder. There's somebody who has a public trust. In this case, a big shoulder of it, of course, will fall on the Treasury, but also on the National Assembly as the key custodians of that public trust and oversight of how the resources are used.
Abraham, in all of this, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think one of the biggest questions that then jots out is is how. Because one of the things that keeps coming up is that, citizens ought to ask questions. Citizens ought to give pushback, ought to say that, where is this money going? Should ask questions. So the question then is, how should this be done? And I often find, and I'm one of the biggest proponents for sticking out and saying, look, this is not right. And I really do believe that institutions bow to pressure when it's applied in the right way. And we've seen this happen. We've seen this happen, that, a lot of pressure can be given, and then either something is done, or at least, at the very least, somebody will sit up and take notice. And that can usually only be done when the thing being presented is not ambiguous in nature, that it is tangible and people can understand. All right, if I don't make noise about this particular thing, the price of bread which I put on my table is directly affected. You see what I'm saying? So unless it has presented itself in a manner that affects the individual at a personal level, and that you can then graduate that to community and say, hey folks, what are we doing about that? It'll then be very difficult to get people to apply this pressure, because the understanding has not been made clear. You don't understand. All right, public debt, it sounds really fancy. But then how do I apply that to a situation in which I am currently? How does it affect my day-to-day? Mm-hmm. Because you have competing issues right now. Somebody's not going to wake up in the morning and say, okay, where do I go and apply pressure when I don't have food on my table, right?
I agree.
And there's the realization that, all right, some of these things that are happening are directly affecting this meal that you're out there looking for. So the question is how? In what spaces? How do people come together? How do these molecules then combine and say, let's get combustion? How do we do it? And I think a lot of times it's ambiguous in nature. Unless it becomes very real, it's difficult for people to push back. And we're saying that's one of the only solutions to this problem.
I completely agree with you, Ndu. One of the things that I worry is that we seem to be becoming numb to the reality. So, first of all, in the last 1 year, the cost of living has increased because taxes have gone up. And the reason why the taxes have gone up is because we have a huge debt bill to be able to pay back. Like, for instance, think about this current financial year. We're going to spend about $1 trillion, which basically you're saying is about 30% of the total budget, including what is planned to be borrowed, and also which equates to about 70% of the total revenue. So for every 100 shillings the country makes, is going to be spending 70 shillings. So we've seen that reflected on the cost of gas. We've seen that reflected in the cost of fuel. We've seen that reflected on the cost of flour and things like that. We've seen the cost of food going up because we are importing food that we produce here as maize goes bad. So I don't think it can get more real than it has already gotten. But then we have spaces that we seem not to be maximizing on. One of those spaces is that we seem to have taken for granted that the roles we give to our members of parliament, to our senators, to our MCAs, the fact that they come around with a couple of goodies around here, we take it for granted, because that's a space, that's a democracy that we have structured for ourselves, because we can't find solutions outside what we have created for ourselves. So we have those spaces. And for instance, we have worked, I've been in this space for a couple of years, and we have sent memorandums and memorandums and memorandums. And every time we have seen communities come around their health facility, around their school, around the dam and the water projects in their area, around the roads being done in the areas through their residents association. I think we take for granted these spaces. And we assume it is the responsibility of my neighbor to act on the road that is bad. So there are spaces for utilization, for engagement, but we're using them as we ought to. But every time we use them, people listen. But there's a problem that I think is bigger than what we are discussing here and I don't think I have a magic bullet to solve it. It's the fact that when you have a breakdown in the rule of law, because we've even had cases that have been gone to court, as you are aware, and determined on, but they were not actioned on. So I think that creates a lot of, empathy, apathy, in people saying, okay, fine, if things are going to remain the same despite my engagement. But that does not mean we give up. We continue to engage in that. So what I wanted to say is that there are spaces of participation, there are institutions of representation that we have elected for ourselves and determined for ourselves. Let's use them. Let's say these things, because I don't think the situation can get is already dire. It is likely to get more dire because taxes are likely to increase in the coming year because of the kind of service of debt that we need to meet.
But Dr.
But
Rugo,
more important,
Dr. Rugo, if I may just chime in, when we talk of apathy, we somehow seem to be taking the view that people more or less just give up and become quiet observers. They are not. People become...
They're not quiet observers.
No, they become participants. You see, the reason why in my mind these problems we just seem to be cyclical. We just go around in circles. They observe, they do due diligence, they try to observe the law, they see it doesn't work. Now, the apathy that we see is they stop doing what they were doing before, but they do something else. And they participate at their level. They will now join the very thing that they were fighting against. Now, they will not see it as that. They will find reason to explain, but that is exactly what we... You see, the essence of the money that politicians give portrays this really well.
Correct.
What are you taking 50 shillings for? The question you would ask. You may not think that 50 shillings is significant, but for many people, that 50 shillings represents something fundamental for that particular day. And why is it? Because their lives are based on a day-to-day existence. So until and unless some of these things that we talk about and some of these things that we propose can address the mindset and the understanding of the majority of our people, which is basically, how do I survive today? Any discussion? Please go ahead, Dr.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please. I'm listening to you.
Yeah, so I completely agree, and that's the kind of apathy that I'm saying. And I started with that point of few of us question how is this goodness of the politician, and yet it has a very direct impact. We have ceased, for instance, to almost stop worrying about unemployment, and therefore it seems that I want actually to just make a living out. I make a living out of it. There's even discussion about, okay, fine, it's a thief, but it's our thief. At least he comes and shares what he has taken and gives back. And almost there's an expectation, even within our society, which I think is becoming more and more worrying, that when somebody gets into an office in public service at whatever level, whether representative or appointed, is supposed to bring back goodies to us. I think those are the things I'm saying that we must start engaging with them. As I've told you, in our small way, especially partners within the Uchumi Coalition, we are trying to bring this awareness that we need to actually engage to solve problems that basically will address in the long term, because when the dispensary works, it's more important that the dispensary works and functions well. It's more important that the schools works and functions well than that I get a handout of 1,000 or 2,000 shillings to go and help my sister or my brother or my cousin who is sick. Because in the end, that's what we should be pushing for.
Irene, so the Okoa Uchumi Coalition is asking people to sign on to this petition. So how do you sign on to the petition, and then what?
The and then what is what I will start on, and I think that just takes on from what Rugo has mentioned, and Rugo can handle the signing of the petition. We have recommendation there, and on this particular petition, there are key recommendations that we have highlighted there. And those are the recommendations that we are asking citizens to rally with us around. A criticon we have mentioned, I know, and that one is a bit mixed reactions towards, is that the CS currently in charge of that docket is someone we are asking a resignation about. But I know the concern would be, this is an individual, and even when you look at the debt stock, it has not been accumulated only within his time. So again, it does show that it's not an issue of around a person, but the systems. But the question then has become that we have asked within his tenure for many things. Evidence has been tabled by civil society players, by academia, by several players, but that has not been able to push. So what we are calling on, the critical one currently for us, is a resignation of the officer in charge of Treasury currently. And Rugo can speak to the...
So is that the main thing? So sign the petition demanding the resignation of National Treasury Cabinet CS Ukur Yatani.
That is one of the things we are looking at. But as we had earlier shared, it's a raft of measures we are looking at. We have also looked at the issue of budgeted corruption, where we are saying that at the point, I know we have been making a lot of noise initially as players. I wouldn't want to call it noise. We have been giving very constructive, very constructive, yes,
Persuasion.
engagement that we need to look at the budgets. And for us, we were like, so long as there is a health center or there's a hospital, then we are happy. But we weren't looking at what cost has this health center been put there. So now we are looking at, can we look at the issues of budgeted corruption? So that's another area we are looking at.
Okay, so directly, once I sign on to this petition, what happens next? I mean, when does the petition close, and then what happens? What's the immediate thing that I'm going to see I signed and I can see the results?
And I am pushing it clearly to my colleague Rugo, my senior, to answer on the way forward on that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I think the critical piece is that the signing of the petition, this is a political process. So the signing of the petition is putting pressure that, first of all, we need to see responsibility being taken. Secondly, that the debt registers and the transparency that needs to be on how much money has come, where has it been spent, who have been the beneficiaries, that is critical. There's also it also has aspects, for instance, of the role that the syndicated loans, the Euro bonds, have been playing, and all questions around that. So basically, and the questions will go to different institutions. Some of them definitely will go to Parliament. What should you see once you sign? We'll wait and see. Basically, this is as you say, this is something we have been at for a long time in terms of asking questions, raising memorandums. We are also sending memorandums, for instance. Today is the last day to send memorandums to the National Assembly around the budget policy statement. We are raising the same questions with the National Assembly on the same week. We raised the same questions last week with the Senate. So basically, they are
Abraham,
different
but
actors playing.
Here's a direct question then. What does my signature add?
It has the political weight.
So you'll use that to say 1,000 people are behind what we are saying.
Correct. Because these are matters that are affecting all these Kenyans. And one of the things, for instance, we have been hoping is that, for instance, people send memorandums on different questions around, budget. So this is just one of those processes that says, look here, guys, things are getting dire. Can we do something?
Okay. So how do people get to sign on to this petition?
So Okoa Uchumi has got different social media. They are all under Okoa Uchumi, okoauchumi.com, Okoa Uchumi Kenya, on Twitter, on Facebook. Basically, just log in there and then you get all the details.
All right. So just log on to any of those platforms, get the details, sign on to the platform. But more and more, I'm sure that the bigger thing also you want to do is create that awareness among the public, that there's a conversation that we need to have around the debt that has been borrowed on our behalf and how it's being applied and being used in the country.
Yeah, and I could not overemphasize it, Eric and Tim, that, guys, this is money that is borrowed in our name. All debt is future tax, so we will pay for it. So if it is used well, we will pay for it while we enjoy the benefits. If it is not used well, we will pay for it while seeing nothing of it. And that's why it's called a debt burden. In fact, the Constitution uses that very language. The burden and benefits shall be shared by current and future generations. So this is a matter that affects you, affects me, affects our children, and therefore we must worry ourselves as to where our money is being used. And in totality, by the way, is that to say that the more we borrow, it means that there's also an issue about, how we are budgeting. And therefore, it's about how all public resources are being utilized in that sense, because the services attached to them are the services we should be getting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Abraham Rugo is a country manager for International Budget Partnerships Kenya. He's been joining us on the line, and Irene Otieno with us in the studio is the National Coordinator at the National Taxpayers Association. Thank you very much for joining us. Come again soon.
Thank you for having us.
And the next one as well, Dr. Rugo, come again soon and be in the studio next time.
I will come. I'll come, Rick.
Asante. The conversation is around putting a stop to theft of public debt. This is what the Okoa Uchumi Coalition, a coalition of civil society actors, are saying. Look, let's have a conversation about our public debt and let's put a stop to the theft of this money that's being borrowed in our name, making sure that it's also being used appropriately and in the right manner.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.